Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-combed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and glad you're joining me again this week for this episode. On today's podcast, I'm going to share with you 7 DIY homestead building projects that I think will make great additions to your homestead if you haven't already added them. These are going to be simple and easy to build projects that really pretty much anybody can do, and I think they're just worth having on your homestead. There's a couple of them I haven't done yet, but I'm hoping this is the year I get them on my homestead. The rest of them I have, but I like to just take a few minutes and tell you all about those things. Also, I just want to tell you, I think lately I haven't been doing a great job on the podcast. I feel like I've been just squeezing it in when I've had a chance here and there, but hopefully today we can get kind of back on track. Things are starting to get a little bit back to normal around here, and I think we got a good show for you today. I want to add some segments to the podcast to try to just make it a little bit better, maybe a little bit longer, and just talk about a little bit of a diversity of things other than only covering the main topic of the show. So I want to start out today first with a kind of an inspirational quote of the day. This one comes from Margaret Atwood. She says, "In the spring, at the end of the day, you should smell like dirt." And I just like that because I resonate with it a little bit. Yeah, I think that's the way we're meant to be. I think at the end of the day, you really should smell like you've been out there working in the garden. And to me, that's a good day. There's a lot of days maybe you don't have the chance to do that and you don't like it as well. You like the days when you can get out there and plug away in the garden and it feels really good. I also want to do a segment, and I'm hoping to do these things every week. I want to do a segment on homesteading relevant news. And there was a couple articles this week that caught my eye. And the first one I want to tell you about is, I'll tell you, this one, it didn't really make me mad. It just kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit and realize that there's some issues, out there. And this article, it sounds like it could have been written by Big Ag, basically, trying to support the using of chemicals, even though that's not really where they come at it from. The article is from Bloomberg, and the title is "How Organic Produce Can Make America Less Healthy." And here's the subtitle. It says, "Claims that everyday fruit and vegetables are tainted by pesticides are having unforeseen consequences." Here's the thing. This article, I'm not going to read the whole article. This was put out on March 9th this year, and again, Bloomberg. And the author is Dina Shanker. And let me just read a little bit of it. Regardless of whether you're a parent or an environmentalist or just a plain old shopper, chances are you've gazed out over the supermarket produce section and asked yourself, should I buy organic? Everyone's heard of the scary chemicals used by agribusinesses to keep your apples worm-free. It's what generates the fear that makes organic produce lucrative. In exchange for more money, consumers are told that they have pesticide-free peace of mind. On Wednesday, the Environmental Working Group, which calls itself a nonpartisan organization aimed at protecting human health and the environment, released its annual ranking of the best Clean 15 and the worst Dirty Dozen produce when it comes to pesticide content. The list is meant to be a tool for the consumer. If your favorite fruit is among the Dirty Dozen, the thinking goes you'd be safer buying organic. That makes sense to me, right? Well, article goes on to say, strawberries and spinach hold the top 2 spots in this year's Dirty Dozen. More than 98% of samples tested positive for pesticide residue. One sample of strawberries, the report states, came with 20 different pesticides, while spinach samples had on average double the amount of pesticide residue by weight as any of the other crops reviewed. When buying conventional, the guide says, try to stick with the Clean 15. These fruits and vegetables, including sweet sweet corn, mangoes, eggplant, and cabbage had the fewest pesticides had the fewest pesticides present and in the lowest concentrations. The guide also helps shoppers feel as if they are saving money safely. You don't need to cough up extra cash for already expensive avocados, for example, because only 1% had detectable pesticides. Okay, so far this article sounds beneficial. I would agree, that things, don't sound too bad so far. Well, it takes an ugly turn, though. Here it goes on to say, but experts in pesticides and toxicology say this annual list. Now, first of all, I'd like to know who these experts are. They're probably the people who are saying it's okay to consume these pesticides in the first place. But it says that they're saying that this annual list, seen as helpful for sales of organic produce, oversimplifies a complicated issue. Just because pesticides are on an apple doesn't mean the apple is dangerous. Meanwhile, critics say the EWG survey muddies what is a much more important message for American consumers. Eat more fruits and vegetables, period. In fact, organic marketing that emphasizes the perceived threat of pesticide residue could be dissuading some consumers from buying fruits and vegetables at all, and that's really not healthy. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole article. I will have a link to this article in the show notes for you to look at yourself. It goes on to really talk about how they think that we should basically just stop talking about the pesticides and even the herbicides that are sprayed on GMO crops. We should stop talking about those things because all we're doing is convincing people not to eat vegetables at all. So it's better to eat poison vegetables than not any vegetables at all. I'll tell you, and I, in some ways, I kind of understand why they're saying this, but this article just reeks of being bought and paid for by some lobbyist for pesticides or something. I don't know, but the fact is, it goes on to say some things like, they surveyed people, and people who would have bought the vegetables say they just won't eat vegetables at all because they can't trust them and they can't afford the organic. Well, first of all, if a person's really that concerned about their health, then they're going to want the vegetables, and they're either going to buy organic, go to farmers markets, or they're going to grow them themselves. And that's what we're going to preach here on this podcast, is that you do need your vegetables. I think they're important. We need them. But grow your own, or go to a farmer's market, or buy them from another organic grower. Yeah, I agree. The organic vegetables in the grocery store, I won't even say way overpriced. They're overpriced, but I think a lot of it's because of government regulations that gets them to that high of a price. You can go to a farmer's market and buy, I find some pretty good deals at farmer's markets. And most certainly, what I grow in my backyard, I can grow cheaper. Some people argue that. They say, your vegetables aren't going to be as cheap growing them yourself. Well, I can grow mine pretty cheap. I just read this article, and it makes me roll my eyes, but it also makes me kind of happy. Let me explain that. Obviously, what we're saying out here, me and others and many of you are saying out there to watch out for these pesticide and herbicide tainted vegetables, it's starting to spread a message that's making them worry a little bit because they're trying to fight back and try to make other kinds of claims to try to get some of their business back. And you really do speak with your wallet. If people aren't buying this stuff, they're going to find alternatives. First, they're going to try to convince you that it's okay, which they've been trying to do for a long time. But I see this as a desperation article. So in some ways, I'm kind of happy to see an article like this because they're trying something desperate. I'm a little unhappy to see an article like this because I fear some people will actually believe it and think, yeah, we should just eat them, even if they're poisonous to us, right? I don't know. You read the article yourself. You can share any comments you have about it. But it goes on to make the case that, small amounts of these poisons are okay. They won't hurt you. It'd be better to have a little bit of this than no vegetables. And yeah, I'm not going to agree with that. I think we got a real epidemic because of this. And yeah, I think eating vegetables is important, but that's why I really promote growing them yourself. And I think that is the message we need to see here. We don't need to just tell people. We shouldn't just preach the fear. We shouldn't just tell people about how these pesticides are dangerous, but we ought to also point them to the alternatives. Look, you can get organic vegetables, at a fair price, or you can grow your own. Let me show you how. And we should not just be yelling out the problem from the rooftops, but we should be yelling out the solutions as well. So I thought I'd share that article with you. I thought it was pretty interesting. And there was another one that I ran across too. that I thought this one was a little bit more inspirational and good. This one's actually a little older, I think, a few months ago, but I ran across it just the other day. I thought, good article. No, actually it is. It published March 24th. I guess it just came out. I don't know why I was thinking it came out a while back. And the title of this one is a UC Berkeley professor shares love of edible nutritious weeds. I'd really just encourage you to go and read this article yourself. It is just encouraging. This professor goes out and he's finding what edible weeds he has in his area, and he's drawing a crowd, and he's teaching while he's doing it. He's out there picking snacks and dinner and whatnot from the weeds that are local in his area, and he's created quite a little stir in the area of other folks wanting him to teach them which ones are safe to eat and what you do with them. And I thought it was an encouraging article, really good stuff, and that's how contagious some of this stuff is. People want to know. Many of these weeds were once grown as food sources, and it's nice when people out there are sharing with others how you can still benefit from these so-called weeds. So it's a good article. I would suggest you go check it out. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Always good to hear a good story like that. Okay, just some updates around my homestead. What's been going on around here? Well, I've been doing a lot of seed starting here recently. Got the peppers and the tomatoes and I don't know, a few other things. I was kind of excited. I had purchased some Achocha cucumber seeds from an American homestead. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but they have a YouTube channel. Great YouTubers. They show their off-grid homestead and lot. But anyway, he was selling some Achocha cucumbers, and I heard about them from him. I'd never heard of them before. And he was showing what they look like and describing how they tasted, and I thought I'd like to have some of those seeds, so I bought a pack of them, and I got the first ones of those sprouted already. So they're in the greenhouse and starting to take off, and I'm excited about getting those planted and trying some Achocha cucumbers. I can't wait to get my hands on some of those and give those a try, and hopefully I can get the seeds from the ones I grow and just keep them going from here on out, and always have Achocha cucumbers if I like them. I think I'm going to like them. They look like they taste really good. So, and from the description I've heard of them, they sound really good. So I'm excited about the Achocha cucumbers. I got to remember to take quail eggs out of my jacket pocket before I go to work. I did that once this week and had a few quail eggs in my pocket. None of them busted. I went through an entire day of work without busting any of them, but I was a little bit nervous about it all day, just trying to make sure I didn't bump up against anything with all these eggs in my pocket. I also wanted to tell you, I was out today at Menards, and they had mason bee houses there. And I actually purchased one of them. It was like $12 or something. It looks pretty nice, and I'm excited about having some mason bees in my yard also. So there's a little homestead update for you. We're going to have mason bees hopefully this year. Just try to draw them in or whatnot. But that'll be some good for the pollination of the trees and the berries and of course the garden in general. So excited about mason bees. So you might want to check with your local store, hardware store, Menards, Lowe's. They're all starting to carry things like this. So it might be something worth hanging up close to your garden and trying to draw in some bees and keep them in there. The main topic of the show today, though, is I want to talk about 7 building projects, to kind of do-it-yourself projects, and these are things you can build yourself. These are things that I think can add a lot to your homestead, and with most of these things, there's some plans that I'll have links to in the show notes at other websites and such that you might want to check out if you're interested in building any of these. And the first one I want to tell you about is a solar dehydrator. Now, the plans that I found for these were at Mother Earth News, really good detailed plans. And, I just tell you, there's so many benefits to having a solar dehydrator. I mean, if you think to yourself, well, I have a dehydrator that I can use in the house or whatever, but, to be able just to put stuff on trays, slide them in the back of it, it's a large unit that you're going to have out there. You can do a lot at one time, and you can use the power of the sun to do it. So, of course, it's an environmental thing. It does take up a little space because it's much bigger than one you would have on your kitchen table, dehydrating things. But I think it's cool. I think it's a cool thing to have on your homestead, and definitely something worth building. The design of it is kind of like a hockey stick, but kind of like laying on its side with the part you would hit the puck with at the top. But it's way, of course, I'm talking way bigger. I'm just talking about the shape here. And the sun, you paint this thing black and it reflects on the inside of it. It kind of soaks in that heat, and then it rises up to the back. And then you have the screens that you slide into the back of it, and you just lay whatever you're wanting to dehydrate on those screens. And, of course, it works. They work great. I've seen several of this design, a little bit different variations of it. And this happens to be one of the things that I have not built myself, but I'm excited to. I keep saying this is the year I'm probably going to build one, but I think I've said that for the last couple years. So I'm hoping that I get around to building this year. But I think it's something worth having on your homestead. I would like to do a whole lot more dehydrating than I currently do, and I think this would be a great way to do it. So build a solar dehydrator, and if you want to see the plans I plan on following are the ones from Mother Earth News, and the link to that is in the show notes. The second thing I want to tell you about as far as a building project goes is an outdoor garden wash station. Now, I did build one of these last spring, and I had an old pop-up camper that it was kind of rotten, the canvas on it was bad and stuff, and I took it all apart to make a trailer out of it. Well, when I did that, of course, I tried to reuse a lot of the material that was in it, and it had a kitchen sink in it, of course. So I took that kitchen sink out, and I had some scrap 2x4s and 1x6s and things like that laying around, and I built a outdoor garden wash station where I could wash off my vegetables and things like that. And there's a lot of benefits to that, and I think it's worth having. You can. Some of the benefits I think to have why you might want to build one of these is it helps to keep the garden soil in the garden. We work hard to build a good, vibrant, living soil, right? So why do we want to just wash it down the kitchen drain? Because that's what happens a lot of times. We bring our vegetables in, there's a little bit of dirt on them, and we wash them off inside. Well, if you have that drain at your station, at your little wash station, empty into a bucket or draining directly into a garden bed, you know what, he can hang on to that valuable soil and keep it where it belongs, right? So I think it's worth having just for that reason alone. Also, I think you can make the most out of your water. I tell you, I used to just cringe when I washed off my vegetables in the kitchen sink, and I'd think about all the water I was wasting. But by having a garden wash station, you can make the most of your water by getting a second use out of it. Because, again, you're catching that water. You can reuse it in the garden. Or you can have it drain right into your garden, maybe drain into a swell or something like that. And you're reusing that water. You're getting more use out of it. I think a third reason you might want to have a garden wash station is you can keep the mess out of the kitchen. It can be pretty stressful. And I think any chance we get a little stress out of our life by keeping the mess outside where it's easier to clean up is good. Because, after a while of trimming and scrubbing and washing, you can just grab a hose and spray down the whole station and the job's done. So it's a lot quicker on cleanup as well. So I just think it's great for that reason. And also, I think probably one of the greatest reasons of all to have a outdoor garden wash station is, guess what? You get to spend even more time outdoors near your garden. And I don't know about you, but anytime I can spend a little more time outside near my garden, I consider it time well spent, right? So, I think building a garden wash station is great to have. Build it near your garden, preferably in a shady spot if you can find a spot, or it has evening shade anyway. Place where you can, get the drain back to the garden or not have to carry the water too far if you do put it into a bucket, which is what I do. I have mine drain into a bucket, and then I just carry it out there and I reuse that water. You want to build your garden wash station with some significant counter space. That way you got a place to set the dirty vegetables on one side, the sink in the middle, and then a place on the other side to set your clean vegetables or your bowls to catch your clean vegetables. So, you want to design it in that way. Again, this can be built out of scrap materials mostly. You need one of the mistakes, one thing I wish I would have done a little different is maybe not have used the sink that I used out of that pop-up camper. Because it's not a real big sink. And I think I would have rather had a little bit deeper basin, a little bit wider, just been a little bit easier to get things under it, perhaps, or down in it. So maybe a larger sink would be better. Maybe a full-size kitchen sink inside of one would be really nice, and I didn't do that. A lot of people use wash tubs and things like that and just kind of sink them down in a cabinet or counter and use that. Of course, you want your drainage to be able to be utilized in the garden, so you'll want to set up the hoses and such for that to work. And you need a decent faucet for it. I actually made my faucet. I actually just took some pipe, and I tried to make it kind of decorative, and you can see pictures of it on my website. I'll have a link to the actual blog post I wrote about it last year when I built it. And I took an old, like one of them old camp style coffee pots, and one of the tall coffee pots with the little, the lid on the top. And I wasn't using it. It was an extra one I had. And I just kind of drilled a hole through the bottom of it, and I plumbed it out. I actually ran a pipe up through it and out it, and shaped it like a faucet out the front of it, and put a little valve on the side of the counter, just a regular old like 90-degree valve you can just open up and close. And it works great. It turns off and on just fine. It looks really cool to have this coffee pot like it's pouring out water into your sink. And I just made it a little decorative because, I'm like that. I like to have a little fun, but it works great. So you can get creative, or you can just take a standard old sink faucet and make something out of it that way, or however you want to do it, but you want to have a decent faucet. Now the counter, like I said, you can make this out of some scrap wood. I had scrap 2x4s and some. Mine isn't real long. I've got just enough room to set a basket of dirty produce on one side and a bowl on the other, and just kind of wash it off and take it over to the other side. Works really good. I just had 2x4s. Like I said, I used some 1x10s to make the counter top. And it was a real simple build. It looks nice. It's a great addition to the garden, and I think you could really benefit from having an outdoor garden wash station. The third thing I want to talk about but it's the second thing that I don't have that I have in this list, and that is a outdoor brick wood oven. I want one of these really bad. They call them pizza ovens or whatever, but people cook anything in them. I mean, throw a chicken in there, you bake bread in it. You can use it like an oven, but you get you a nice hot bed of coals and you push them to the back after it gets all heated up, and then they have a little door you can put on the front. Brickwoodovens.com has some great plans and materials for building your very own brickwood oven. I think these things are a great addition to a homestead. I'm going to build one of these. I want one really bad, and I think it'd just be great to be able to go out there and fire this thing up and cook your dinner in it. And again, just a great opportunity to be outside more, be near your garden, be out enjoying the weather. Also, just keeping the heat out of your house. Have it outside at that oven would be nice too in the summertime. So I think they're just a great addition. It can be a little costly depending on the design you go with. What I like about the plans at brickwoodovens.com is they actually have these molds, and you basically set and you build it around these molds. It tells you how the exact layout and how you put your bricks around it and form it, and it has a perfect form in there when you're done. So these things are really nice. I love the idea of that. It can be a little costly, like I said, depending on which design you go with. Some of the designs are really expensive, but a basic one looks nice and has great function and would be a great addition to your homestead. So I'll have a link there in the show notes also to brickwoodovens.com. Also, the show notes for this episode, I guess I should probably tell you that, are at smalltownhomestead.com/59. This is episode 59. So yeah, you'll be able to see all these links that I'm talking about there. So now, the next thing I want to talk about is something I actually talked about last week, and I just feel like, I don't know, I become more and more convinced that every homestead should have one of these, and that's an herb spiral. And if you're into permaculture at all, it's almost a required thing to have, I think, in your backyard, to have an herb spiral. So I think they're great, though. I think there's just so many benefits to having one. You can build them out of just about any scrap materials or rocks or whatever. You just need a mound of soil and some materials to just make your spiral with. Now, I actually just watched a Bill Mollison video where he just talks about making them. Now, the one I made and some of them I've seen made before, people lay down the spiral first and then fill it with dirt. They basically build their spiral up and then fill it with the soil. Bill Mollison says not to do that. He said just mound up a pile of soil about 6 foot in diameter, and to a point about 3 foot high. Okay, so you're bringing it up like a cone, about 3 foot high, 6 foot wide, all the way around, and then start laying your spiral around it, and kind of like taking a shovel and kind of like flattening out where your spiral, you're just going to sit on the edges, and then spiral it up. And he says it's a lot quicker, a lot easier, and it'll settle down a little bit, and it'll kind of flatten down just a little bit, but it's a lot easier to build that way. And I thought, well, that would be a lot easier to build than the way I've seen it done, the way I did it. So their video, I have a link in the show notes, And it's an article from permaculturenews.org. And there's some instructions in there on building an herb spiral. But there's actually that video of Bill Mollison talking about building one is in that article. So check that out. I think it's worth watching. And talks about some of the benefits as well of having an herb spiral in your garden. So great addition to the garden. Something that I built about 3 years ago, and I can't even imagine my backyard without this now. I guess I've had it 4 years. 4 years ago I put this in, and that's a backyard garden pond. It's not a big pond. I have probably about a 150-gallon pond in the backyard. It's not huge. I mean, it's pretty good size, but for a small backyard. But wow, what a beneficial thing to have in your backyard. I mean, you're going to draw in a lot of animals, like frogs and things. We had a little bit of a slug problem around here. Well, we brought in frogs, and guess what? I noticed last year we didn't really have a slug problem. I don't know if it's because the frogs are eating them. I mean, I heard that they'll eat the slugs, but we've always had a slug problem around here, and I've got a lot of mulch, and I don't remember seeing a single slug last year, and I think it's because of the frogs that are in that pond. And just we got some koi fish and some goldfish in there. And we got some water lilies that make nice flowers, and some stuff called water lettuce that really makes some nice flowers and really pretty to look at. And you know what? Sometimes I do a little bit of water change for the fish, and guess what? I don't waste that water. That water goes on the garden, and that's good, nutrient-rich water. I pour that on the gardens, and they seem like they just love it. Things really come to life in a day or two after I pour that water on the garden. So I'll do about it every 2 weeks. I'll probably empty out a quarter of that pond and fill it with fresh water, and just use that water throughout the gardens and stuff. And I think it works good, And I'm also going to use that pond to run a pump in through some wicking beds that I'm going to build in my greenhouse. I've talked about that a couple times, but I just think there's so much you can do with a small garden pond. I'd like to actually get some water chestnut and grow in it at some point. Those things are hard to find. It's hard to find something to start with on that, but I would like to use it to even grow some food at some point. So there's just a lot of benefit. It draws in, a lot of wildlife that is beneficial to your garden, and I just think it's worth having. And all that aside, they're just great to look at. I mean, it's just a beautiful addition to the backyard, and it's so worth looking at. It doesn't have to be expensive. Something Bill Mollison talked about back on the herb spiral. He said when you come down to the spiral at the very bottom, you can actually have it to where it goes into a little pond. And he said that he would actually do that. He would actually run a little bit underground with the spiral and then have a little pond at the end and actually have some water chestnut in there growing. And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome. I mean, you could just take that spiral right underground and turn a little pond in at the end. And that'd make a nice little pond. I've seen people take tires and sink them down in the ground and then just take some, like some construction plastic or something like that. Now, that stuff may not last forever, but if it's that small of a pond, it wouldn't be hard to redo every couple of years. And then plant a few little plants and make them look really nice. And it's a small pond. It's right in the middle of your garden or something, and it just looks really good. And it draws in, it really does create a little microclimate and draw in some wildlife that's beneficial. So yeah, I think having a garden pond is really worth it. Like I said, I spent a little bit of money on mine, but not much. Mine's actually one of them hard ponds. It's one of the hard plastic ponds that you sink down in the ground. And I actually found that on Craigslist. Somebody had took it out, and I can't remember. Like I said, it's a pretty good size one, 150 gallon or something like that. And I think I paid like $50 or something. And it came with all the rocks that went around it and things like that. So, and then the pump was bad. I had to buy a pump. I probably got less than $100 in my pond, and I just think it's a great little addition to my backyard. So I would advise putting one in. I think they're great to look at, and they actually do serve a purpose too on your homestead. Okay, one of the most basic things that every homesteader ought to have is a compost bin. Well, you can build a compost bin out of scrap materials. You can use pallet wood or just some scrap wood you have around. I mean, you don't have to use anything. You can just make compost piles. But having a compost bin is nice. You can compartmentalize it. And kind of the one that I think works best is you have like these 3 compartments. And then what you'll do is you'll put your stuff in the one, it starts decomposing. And then you just take you can take like a hay rake or a shovel and just flip it into the next bin. and then you'll flip it into the next one after a while again. So you have this constant rotation where you're starting the next one and then you're flipping it over and then putting it into that one again. And you just get this rotation. Well, by the time it gets to the third bin, sets for a short time. By the time your first bin is ready to flip over, that last bin's ready to take out, and that's finished compost, and you can put that on your garden. So you can take pallets, and you'll see them like 3 wide in the back, and then you have them divided up. You'll have a pallet on one end, pallet on the other end, and then the 2 pallets separating the middle, and that makes 3 bins. So for basically 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pallets, you have a nice compost bin. You can do this in a million ways. I've seen it. Some people put lids on them to keep them less moist. I mean, there's different things you can do. I would advise a good way to look at that is look on Pinterest. Pinterest has great ideas for things like that. So look at some of the designs out there and the ones that work best for you. That's what I have. I have the three compartments, and just flip it over and keep it going that way. Really moving more onto the vermicomposting, though, these days, but I really still use that. And I mean, that's where the scrap vegetables, a lot of times, whatever goes in there, and we keep those composted. But yeah, it's worth having. Every homestead should have one. And if you don't have one, you really should build one. Find a place out by a garage or something like that, away from you. Initially, finished compost doesn't smell at all. Initially, when you first put stuff in there, you're going to get just a little bit of smell. Depends on what you put in there, of course, too. You're going to get a little bit of smell, so you don't want it right up next to your house or anything. And the good thing about making it to where maybe you got a fold up front and maybe a closing top is you can keep some animals out of it that might want to get in and eat your scraps, like possums and stuff. So yeah, it might be worth making an enclosure or putting chicken wire, maybe a fold down chicken wire front on it. Where you can fold that up and keep animals out. So, look at some different designs on that. There's some great designs out there. So, the last thing I want to talk about that I think is a great addition to a homestead, and that's a potting bench. And you think, well, I don't really need a potting bench. I go out there every spring, and I sit on the picnic table or whatever, or, on my deck, and I just pot up everything, get everything going, ready. Well, the benefit to having a potting bench is, well, for one thing, you have a designated place for that. Okay, you're going to have a designated place where you keep your pots, you keep your little hand trowels and things like that, your little shovels, whatever. Keep your soil there. You just got supplies there. Okay, you might have a little cabinet underneath where you can throw some things in there, and you have a designated place. Well, a couple things. First, it makes that initial time a lot easier, but it also encourages succession planting. Well, you're going to grow a whole lot more vegetables if you do that. When one thing's about done, you put another thing in its place. Well, if you have a constant circulation of things being potted up and seed starting all summer long, you just constantly are replacing those things in your garden that are being used up. And you find yourself growing a lot more vegetables, a lot more food, and it just becomes a place where you go and you spend time. Now, I have one that I built in my greenhouse, where I put it in my greenhouse. But even if you don't have a greenhouse, just having a designated place in the shade outside somewhere where you can pot up some vegetables, build you a potting bench. It's really worth having, and it'll be a great place for you to spend time. A nice, comfortable place where all your supplies are always there, and again, do an image search on the internet, and you'll see some just great ideas out there for building some of these things. I was jealous. I did that before I did the podcast, just looking around some different designs and stuff, and I'm almost wishing I had done mine a little bit different. I might be changing some things on mine because I actually liked what I saw on a couple of them. So, yeah, browse around. I like to have the shelves up at the top there. You have like a back on it with some shelves at the top where you could set some things, and I'd like to have done that. So there's some great ideas out there. Find one you like and get to it. And I'll tell you, that's something you can build. Mine's built out of pallet wood. I had some small pallets. They're like quarter-size pallets, and I built them out of that, and it came out great. So, build you a nice potting bench. I think it's something you won't regret. So there you have it. 7 things I think that are easy to do. Building projects. Some of them are a little bit more complicated. Like the food dehydrator is going to be a little bit more complicated. The brick oven is going to be a little more complicated. But again, these are things worth doing, I think, that'll just add to your homestead, make your garden more enjoyable, make spending time out in your yard more enjoyable, and just be great additions to your homestead. So there you have it, 7 DIY building projects for your homestead. Hey, here at the end of the show, I want to talk about a couple recommendations. I'd like to start doing this every week. I share some recommendations occasionally in our Facebook group, the Homestead Front Porch. By the way, I always have to plug the Homestead Front Porch, don't I? We have over 6,000 members in that group now. I can't hardly believe it. And we have some great conversations in there. And if you want to be a part, and you're not yet a part of the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, just do a search on Facebook, Homestead Front Porch. It's a closed group, but all you have to do to join is ask, and we'd love to have you in there and being part of the conversations. A lot of good homesteading stuff, especially gardening stuff here lately. Of course, it's that time of the year. Gardens are on everybody's mind. A lot of great stuff going on in there in the Homestead Front Porch. So come be a part of it if you're not already. But anyway, I do recommend some things occasionally in there. What I'd like to do is start maybe every week, have a couple recos. Just here's a couple things I want to recommend for today's show. And this week, I want to tell you about a couple things. One, a new podcast I found. And a great podcast. I think she's doing a great job. She's not real deep into it yet, 26, 27 episodes, something like that. It's called Living Free in Tennessee. And that's the website, livingfreeintennessee.com. I think it's what it is. Hold on, I'll just make sure that's what that is now that I'm sitting here looking at it. Yep, livingfreeintennessee.com. Yep, she's up to episode 28, actually. Great little podcast. She does a pretty long show, hour and a half, I think, listening to it. But I really enjoyed it. I started listening to her last week, and I listened to 2 or 3 episodes, and I was like, that's really good. And I think it's one you'll enjoy. So check that out. I think it's a great podcast. And I don't know this. I don't know her. Nicole Sauce is her name. And I know she's a big Jack Spirko fan. I hear her talking about Jack Spirko a lot in his podcast, which is another great one. But she actually lives down where I used to live in Tennessee, in the same town as where I used to live. Actually, I think she's close to there. She lives down by in the Cookeville, Tennessee area. I went to high school there, so that right there just kind of drew me to the podcast. Anyway, I didn't even know that till I started listening to her and I heard her mention it, and I was like, "Oh, wow!" So we're kind of from the same area there. So it's a good podcast. Go check that one out. That's one of my recommendations for today. Also, I want to tell you, and I did share this in the Homestead Front Porch a while back. And if you have Netflix, there is a documentary on there called Sustainable. So just search on Netflix for Sustainable. And it's a really good documentary worth watching. If you don't have Netflix, I think you can, there's a link in the show notes or to the documentary. And let's see where else it's at. It's also, and Amazon also, not YouTube, just, you can also see it on Amazon. So, it's something you can even rent and watch on VHX. I don't even know what VHX is, but you can watch it there. Really good documentary worth taking some time, especially for free on Netflix. If you can watch it for free on Netflix, it's really worth watching. So I would recommend you go see that. It has a lot to say about the modern day food movement, to organic practices and things like that. Kind of spits in the face against everything that I said earlier in that one article that they wrote about in that first article I talked about in the news. So yeah, a couple recommendations there for you. The documentary Sustainable, and check out the Living Free in Tennessee podcast. Good stuff there. I also want to just take a minute here at the end of this podcast just to thank everybody that makes this podcast possible. I've been doing this for a couple years now. Not always consistently. There was some time there where I got away from it for a couple months, and then this last time we've had a little bit of a hiccup here. But I want to thank those who make it possible. There's a few of you who support us through Patreon, and I want to thank you for that. And there's been a few that's donated through PayPal, and I appreciate that as well. Also, there's some who shop Amazon through our affiliate link, and I always appreciate that. That doesn't cost anybody any extra to do, but then you can just go to our website or go to the show notes, and you'll find an Amazon link at the bottom of the episode show notes here, and you can click on that, and then when you purchase something through Amazon, there's a kickback that comes back to us for referring that. So I always appreciate folks that do that, and I'm also just thankful to those who encourage us by leaving an iTunes review or sharing this podcast with others. I've had a lot of great iTunes reviews here recently, and I really appreciate that. And I've been a little bit shocked by that. We've never received anything less than a 5-star review. And, I know there's better podcasts out there. I just appreciate that, I really do. I know sometimes the quality isn't isn't perfect, and sometimes I cut the podcast kind of short or rush through it because I'm in a hurry, and sometimes I just want to get something out to you guys because I feel like I just want to do something, even if I don't have time. I try to squeeze something in, and it may not come out to be the best podcast ever, but I try to get something out to you when I can, even if it isn't at its best. So I appreciate those of you who recognize that and yet still give me a 5-star review, because I'm trying, and every once in a while there's just a great nugget in the podcast that might help you out or encourage you. So I appreciate that, and all of you who help us out any way you can, either financially or just by sharing the podcast. And I've watched the numbers increase about 5 times what they started out with or last year, and so we've really came up in our numbers, and I really appreciate that. So that's because of you. You're sharing it, you're listening, and I appreciate it. Anyway, that's the show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll get out there this spring and get started on them building projects. Maybe there's some things you think a homestead should have, and you want to maybe share that with us. You can jump into the show notes here and leave a comment, or you can jump into the Homestead front porch and say, those are some great suggestions, but I think the homestead ought to have this. Here's another great building project. I'd love to hear about it. Maybe a different way to do any of those things I talked about today. Love to hear about that too. Yeah. Have fun. Have a great spring. And until next week, happy homesteading, and God bless.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.